gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Pinecrest Gardens, formerly known as the Parrot Jungle for many, many years. I can't imagine a more beautiful December day to come and remember and celebrate the life of my father, Harold Samuel Lobree. The very same venue, outdoors, we used to remember the life, celebrate the life of my mother, Janine, who passed away in 2012. I'd like to thank everyone for coming this morning. If you haven't already silenced your phone, please do so. We're going to begin our memorial with a flag presentation of a veteran's flag that was presented to my brother Baird after my father was interred last month in November. And the flag will be presented by my nephew, Paul Baird Lobree, who is a cadet at Virginia Military Institute. I'm sorry, at Virginia Polytechnic University. Please rise for the presentation of the flag. Please be seated. The first family member to make remarks this morning is my brother, my much older twin brother, Shaw Vince. 4 minutes older, and he's still lording it over me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Organized here. So we're going to try to keep it very informative, and I'm going to give a little presentation. I'm going to try not to be too long-winded. How's that? Better?
Yes.
A little better? So I guess through being a volunteer, maybe some of this was foisted on me, had picked up the mantle from Sean and Joanna. I did a lot of work on our family history. After my mom got hospitalized in 2012 with cancer, I actually had started really digging into our family history and going all the way back to the gold rush days. Some work that Sean and Joanna did with my dad and my mom. But I started recording my father, talking about his incredible life. And this summer I started transcribing some of those sessions because they were disjointed. Some of them were in restaurants, it was loud, or we got interrupted. So I tried to make it into some cohesive narratives in his own words. And so we're going to read a few of those to you this morning. But this was a quote that he said, and I really think it sums up his life. When you think about it, I had the most incredible set of circumstances that happened to me throughout my lifetime. And you know, obviously we're biased, I'm very biased, but my dad really did have an incredible life, incredible story. Really did live the American dream. This is a picture of his family. That was his father, Elias Lobree. He was born in 1884. His father was a gold rush general store merchant in the California area. That's his mother and father, May and Elias, around the time, a few years after they got married in Hot Springs, Arkansas, which is where Bill Clinton hails from. It was a gambling resort and a mineral resort that was the big thing back in the day, before actually Miami Beach. It was Hot Springs in the South. May Lobree was his mother. She hailed from New York, the Manhattan area. She was born in 1896. On the right there, that's May and very young Harold. Look how exhausted she looks and how exhausted he looks. So pardon my French, but he was a pain in the ass right from the get-go. And then all the way on the right there, May is all dollied up, and she has Harold in a little outfit. They look much more rested and much happier. Many people don't know this. My father never, ever talked about this. But he actually had an older sister, Selma. She was born in 1920. Excuse me, she was 3 years older than he was, or 4. This picture was taken in May of 1923, and tragically she fell to her death. So that really set the tone for my father's childhood, because his parents had lost Selma. And so on the one hand, excuse me, I think it made Eli withdraw a little bit, overcoming that heartbreak of losing little Selma. And I think it made his mom maybe a little more attentive and clingy. Maybe she spoiled him a little bit more. So this is some pictures of young Harold. He was quite the little lad, and he was born in Pittsburgh, but they traveled all around a lot. That became part of his life. This is the only photo of Harold and his father. His father lurking in the background, sort of withdrawn. Still during the good times in Pittsburgh. To the right there, that's May and Harold at Venetian Pool here. Some other shots. You can see Harold was loved animals. Found a little cat to pet, found a little stray dog to pet. So some great shots of young Harold. Now I'm going to invite Daniel to come up and give a really classic anecdote about my father as a young boy. He's going to read it to you. Come on up, Daniel, from his childhood.
Thank you. So here's a story recorded in November 2012. We were living in Manhattan, kind of a poor area with a big thoroughfare going through and lots of traffic and so forth. From the earliest days, I just wandered on my own, 5, 6 years old. I just wandered out and be gone for hours and wandered back, because my father's out of town and my mother's working. I never had a babysitter in my life. Nobody had ever heard of the word. Newsstands were the big thing in those days. They displayed all the magazines and back covers. It was thrilling to just browse around and watch people and look at all this stuff. I was captivated with the printed word from the earliest time. Books, to me, were everything, which I checked out of the library. The magazines with all the color pictures was contemporary stuff. Books were Dickens, stories from way back. But the magazines, that's today. I would pick the magazines and stand there and read them for hours on end until I got run out by the proprietor. I never bought anything because I didn't have any money. One day something came to the stands. What the hell is that? There were these little books, and they were on heavy newsprint. The book was thick as hell. It was about 4 inches by 5 inches and had a stiff cardboard cover and about an inch thick. There were cartoon drawings and whatnot. It was this big thing in your hand with some head, and it was thrilling to hold. It had all these kinds of choose from. Dick Tracy, Little Old Canary, Mickey Mouse, Flash Gordon, Popeye. The covers had beautiful color graphics, bright primary colors. So I'm this little kid, 7 years old, it was my dream to get one. It probably cost 15 cents a piece, hell of a lot of money, very expensive. So I saved and saved, and I knew just which one I would buy. I decided which one was my favorite one, Tarzan of the Apes. I learned very early on they charged 1 or 2 cents deposit on soft drink bottles. So I let this little kid could go up and down alleys, and he could look in garbage cans, and sometimes there would be a few deposit bottles. And I'd take them down to the grocery store and turn them in for a few cents. I finally amalgamated this incredible sum. I got my 15 cents and I ran to this newsstand and I bought Tarzan of the Apes big little book. I'm almost trembling. I couldn't wait to get home and sit down to read it. I walked to the newsstand to the next corner. I'm standing there and traffic is going by and there's these trolley cars. I open this thing up and I'm looking at it. I'm completely engrossed in the big little book. I turn about 3 or 4 pages, then one. This older kid comes running up, sees me with the book, and he hit my hand, the book flies up in the air, He grabs it, runs into the street, into the painted streetcars just coming by. He jumps on the back, he said something nasty to me, gave me the finger, and he's gone. I'm sitting there, a 7-year-old kid, my life savings, and the first possession I paid for on my own, gone. I went home, I went crying home. I was shattered for about a day. But I got over it pretty fast. I accepted it. That's what happens in New York. It was my significant education. I was 7 years old when it all happened. The school of hard knocks, I got plenty of hard knocks. But overall, I was happy as a clam. Happy. I was a happy kid, joking all the time. This endless mood my parents did. That's just the way it was. I didn't complain or bitch or moan about anything. That's it. That was my childhood.
So, my father, Harold, was born in Pittsburgh, where his father lived. His father actually met May in New York, but early on, they started coming down to Miami Beach. And Miami Beach didn't exist at the turn of the century, and they dug it out of the mangroves, Carl Fisher and others, and they turned it into this incredible world's winter playground. That's how it was deemed. Many people don't realize how incredible it was. There was actually a dog racing track on South Beach near the pier. That pier was the $1 million pier. It was a steel pier. That was a huge attraction that my father would play at. Over there on the right, that's May with a great smile in the picture with the arms around her, with her family. She came from a big family. So there was speedboat racing in the bay off of Fisher's Flamingo Hotel. Carl Fisher's Hotel was on the bay side. There was polo. It was an incredible spot. And they would come here on vacation. I'm sure they weren't staying at the Flamingo Hotel, but they would come here on vacation, and May just loved it. He was born in 1925, and the first few years of his childhood were actually pretty happy. They were fairly middle class, and then the Depression hit really hard. And they kind of clicked into a nomadic lifestyle. And as a little kid, he remembers living in Pittsburgh, Allentown, Queens, Baltimore, Brooklyn, Asheville, Lakewood, New Jersey, Atlantic City, Catskills, Bronx, Niagara Falls, Rye, New York, Saratoga Springs, and some other spots. So constantly moving. But his mother May decided when he got to be in the 7th grade, that's it, she's done with the moving. And she told Eli that they were going to live in Miami. And it's a long story, but they wound up on Miami Beach. And I went over there with my father a few years ago. These are the two places they lived in. They moved, even on Miami Beach, they would move. During the summer when it got hot, they would move into a nicer place because a lot of people moved back north during the summer. And then when it started to cool off, they would move back into the cheaper place. And he talked about the one-room efficiency that they all lived in. His parents slept on a fold-out Murphy bed. He slept on the couch. But the incredible thing is, the Miami Beach High School was literally right across the street. So that became his life. And just briefly, Sean is going to tell you a story about Irving Kofsky, one of his early friends. Jim Snedeker was the son of the mayor of Miami Beach, Red Snedeker, who was mayor several times. And after Jim punched my dad out on the first day of school, my dad decided he had to befriend Jim, and they became fast friends. But just look at that grin on his face. And look at that picture, the other picture, he was in the student council. That's the happy look on his face. Incredible. I'm going to read you a story about his drumming. So this is in his words. I'm sitting on the front steps of our apartment building one day during the summer after 7th grade. It's too hot inside with no air conditioning. My mother is working. I'm home by myself. I'm sitting there with my cat. It was a stray cat. I had given it a little something to eat, then it hung around more, then it became my cat. It was black with a little bit of white on the nose. I called him Panther. So I'm fumbling with my cat on the stoop when I hear something in the distance. I wonder what the hell it is. It sounds like some kind of drumming. The sound gets louder and louder. Finally, here comes a kid down the street, walking up to my building. And he's playing a snare drum on a sling around his neck, a military drum. He's drumming down the street, joyfully practicing all by himself. He gets up opposite of me, and he's a guy about my age, but taller. He comes right up to me and then stops playing and starts petting my cat. He says, "What's your cat's name?" I answer, "Panther." He says, "I've got a cat too, Striped. I call him Tiger." I pointed to his drum and I said, "Hey man, where'd you get that? I've never seen a drum like that before." His face lights up. He says, "Well, they gave it to me down at Flamingo Park." I was incredulous. "Gave it to you?" "Well, yeah, it's their drum, but I take it home, play it anytime I want. I'm a member of the Miami Beach Junior Drum and Bugle Corps." I can't believe it. I say, "All right, where are you going now?" He says, "We're having a practice down at Flamingo Park." I say, "Can I come too?" He says, "Sure, come on. Come on." So I asked him again, "How did you get in this band? How did you get that drum?" He says, "You just ask them and they give you a paper to take home for your mother to sign. Then they give you a drum and drum lessons." I can't believe it. I say, "No kidding?" He says, "Yeah." This is classic. Grover Childers was the guy's name. He became a good friend of mine. Turns out we went to the same school, but I didn't know him. So I went with Grover, and I'm just carried away watching this. We get to Flamingo Park, which was just a few blocks from our apartment. I met the instructor and said to him, "I want to join the Drum and Bugle Corps." The instructor says, "Oh, do you really?" He got the paperwork out and said, "Now get your mother to fill this out and sign it and bring it back, and we'll start giving you lessons." So I raced home with it that night, and my mother signed the papers. The next day I went down there with the papers and I joined. They didn't have a drum to give me, they were all loaned out. But they were glad to see me because they had a lot of turnover. The instructor says, "Well, you'll practice, you'll learn, and in the meantime, you can go to all of our events and you carry the flag." So there he is, holding the flag before he got his drum. I was thrilled with that too. My God, carry the American flag. Unbelievable. Uniform and a little World War I shallow soldier helmet. I thought, this is incredible. Have your own drum. Be a drummer. Everybody's looking at you. Something that called attention to yourself. We practiced and practiced, got a little bit better, and eventually we performed in some pitiful way on the 4th of July, so I could play a little bit. Then school starts again, and I learned they've got a band at the junior high, and you can sign up and you get lessons, and they have drums and all kinds of instruments, and it's free. I go down and I tell the band director, Felix McKernan, that I've been playing drums in the Bugle Corps. He took me on as the bass drummer. That's the big drum, boom, boom, boom. They needed a bass drum, and he told me if I get good on the bass, he would move me to snare drum. I really practiced, and I got to be fairly good and enthusiastic as hell. Then a very lucky thing happened to me. One day, Mr. McKernan calls me into his office, and there is a red-headed man sitting there. He says, "Lobree, I want you to meet Rollo Leyland. He's a drummer at the Kitty Davis Airliner," which was a top nightclub in town. McKernan adds, "Mr. Leyland used to play with Paul Whiteman," which was the #1 big band at the time. I was flabbergasted. This is a celebrity I'm meeting. Rollo Leyland says, "I just moved to Miami and I'm playing at Kitty Davis, but I want to get a bunch of young people going on drums and do a little teaching. Would you like to take lessons from me?" I popped up. Would I ever? "But I have to tell you, Mr. Leyland, I don't have any money. My mother doesn't have any money. We don't have any money." Leyland says, "Well, we won't charge much. How about 50 cents a lesson? Just so you're paying something." I said, "I think my mother could come up with that. We can do that." 6 months earlier, I had never touched a drum, and now I'm taking private lessons from one of the top drummers in the world. It was a miracle. Rollo starts giving me lessons, a 2-hour lesson for 50 cents. Then he said, "Now you got to practice 2 to 3 hours a day." He said, "If you do everything right and practice enough, you'll start getting better." I stayed with Rollo Leyland through high school, playing drums every day. Eventually I got very good and started winning drumming contests. And then I entered with other soloists from the Beach High Band in the annual Florida State Championships. One year it was in Tampa, another year in Daytona Beach. In 10th grade I won first place in the drumming contest. Our band won first place as well, which qualified us to go to the national championships. We got on a bus and went to Richmond, Virginia. I won first place at military drumming with the snare drum. Rollo Leyland started teaching me jazz drumming then with the full traps: tom, bass drum, snare, hi-hat, cymbals, brushes. Leyland had co-written with Gene Krupa the drumming manual, so I had one of the best teachers in the United States. He had a wonderful personality, red hair, very likable, fabulous drummer. And he was thrilled to have a student who did exactly what he told him to and would come along as quickly as I did. For the first few years I was playing the school's drum that they supplied, but then my mother got her sister's husband, Uncle Martin, to loan me the money, $50, to buy this small set of drums. Aunt Ada and Uncle Martin, they were rich people to me. They would come to Florida every winter on the train. So in about the 9th grade, I started playing in the 2-story hotels on South Miami Beach. The Clevelander, the Delano, the Raleigh, the National, the Sagamore, Carlisle, the Tides, Shelburne. 3 hours, $3. It was all non-union. Usually everything was a one-night stand. I played a lot of gigs with a horn player named Joe Purnell, who was a few years older than me. So my ticket out of poverty was going to be my drums. That's all I had in mind I was ever going to be, was a jazz drummer. That was it, until World War II came along and I got to go to college on the GI Bill. So there, of course, is Rollo Leyland. There's my dad. Look at that grin in the Miami Beach High School band. He did some marching as well. Incredible story. Sean is going to talk to you a little bit more about my father's basketball experience. These are some great pictures from his final year in high school. He started a fraternity at Miami Beach High with his buddy Jim Snedeker. He had a leading role in the senior class play. He got voted most musical, and there he is with some of his girlfriends coursing around on Miami Beach. Barry's going to tell you a lot more about my father and World War II, but there he is playing at basic training in the General's Jazz Band. On the far right, that is in front of this Donald Copley. That's in front of the Fox Theater in Atlanta. Copley was going to Emory as the officer training candidate. My father was in that program as well. Sean will talk to you about that. This great photo, that's his buddy who he met in the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium, Sherman Frank. And that's my father as well. And these are some of the medals that he won. Barry's going to tell you a fantastic story, read you actually about the Battle of the Bulge. This is my father's University of Texas experience. He had an incredible experience at UT on the GI Bill. This makes it look like it was all fun, but he actually studied very hard. He made all A's, maybe a B or two. This was in Austin. It was the state capital. It was kind of a little town back then. But he spent a lot of time also playing drums in a Sunday jazz session, the jam session that he organized. This is the time, keep in mind, of Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, the height of the bebop jazz era, the mid to late 40s. There's a picture of my dad in one of his jazz jam sessions. His team went and performed at the Sugar Bowl Classic. It was the University of Texas versus Alabama. University of Texas won. And then he was actually awarded the Bronze Star for his combat action, also the Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society. Final picture or two. He joined his Uncle Milton in the oil business. Flora's going to tell you a little bit about Uncle Milton. These are some pictures. That's one of their oil wells that they dug together. I love the sign that they had on the oil well. My dad devised a little Lobree L&L logo, a little early rudimentary logo. And many people don't know there was a big oil industry in Indiana in the late 30s and into the 40s, actually through the 50s. And it was in southern Indiana and then up a little bit in the northeast, but he was mostly active in southern Indiana there. It was discovered in 1938, the Griffin Gusher. And then finally, the Jazz Festival. My father did not play drums professionally as a jazz artist after those jam sessions at the University of Texas, but he organized the Indiana Jazz Festival in 1960 and 1961. It had been in French Lick, Indiana at the Sheraton Hotel, but after the Newport Jazz Festival riots, they decided to cancel the event. My dad got wind that they were canceling the event. He called up the promoter, George Ween, and had them move the festival to Evansville in the South. There he is with Mitch Miller, who was a famous jazz artist who played with Charlie Parker. Gene Lees. There's some great anecdotes about Dave Brubeck's alto player going to my father's house for a party and breaking into the wrong house. Someone pulled a gun on them. Duke Ellington performed. He gave Cannonball Adderley, who was the top saxophone player at the time, this International Critics Poll Award. There he is with Benny Goodman and the mayor. There's my mom. This is right before they got married. My mom is in the middle there in the far right picture. She was his lieutenant, helped him a lot. They had Mel Torme. It was a really incredible event. They had it 2 years in a row. You know, if you read the obituary and you think about the story, my dad just had an incredible jam-packed life, and you're going to hear some more anecdotes, but a lot of this huge production, Hal Lobree Productions, I call it, that he had going on, really sort of came to an end. Why? Because he decided to move here and start a family. And he really, from that point on, put all of those energies into his family. One thing I encourage you to do, this is a beautiful garden here, the Pinecrest garden. Please take a tour. Our father loved horticulture. You can just take a self-guided tour. I want to also thank some of our guests that traveled a long way to be here, from Boston, Atlanta, Hilton Head, Columbia, and Tampa. Thank you very much. I want to just recount one story that I have that pertains to me. You guys heard we did a lot of sailing. One year Baird was going to sail in the World Championships in Yugoslavia in Optimus dinghy. We were nearby at our house on the patio helping pack up for Baird to go. And I was an incredibly mischievous kid. I had a fantastic life, but you can see the little grin on my face. I got in a lot of trouble. So we're there, I'm about 10 or 11, Baird is a little bit older, going to go sailing in Yugoslavia. We're all packing up. My dad's very businesslike about it, and I'm clowning around. So he finally gets angry at me, and he vanquishes me to the backyard where he had all these rare fruit trees that he loved to plant. So I'm going back, and this was not the first time I had been vanquished or punished. So I'm walking back there, I'm mad, you know, I'm embarrassed. So I'm saying, he sent me out there to pull all the weeds around the sapodilla tree. And we'd been working the day before in the backyard, pulling weeds. So I got in my mind, I'm going to get the weeds from yesterday and put them next to the sapodilla tree and say, yep, I pulled some weeds. So I'm halfway to the sapodilla tree, and I cooked this up in my mind, and I heard my dad say in a very loud voice, what do you want to bet that knucklehead tries to get the weeds from yesterday? And put them next to the sapodilla tree. So I'm 11 years old, and it was just like God, a thunderclap hit me, like, all-seeing, all-knowing. But it wasn't until I became an adult that I learned all the knuckle-headed things that he did as a kid and where I got it from. The final thing I want to say about my father is, you know, as I thought about him, he had the mind of an aristocrat, but the heart of a commoner. And I think that sums him up. And I would just say to conclude, he really loved life. He lived life to the fullest. So thank you very much.
I'd like to invite my son, Sean Walker Lobree, up to share some memories of his grandfather.
Thanks for coming out, everybody. Really love to see everyone here. This is largely unscripted, but I have a quick little story or two about my grandfather as well. And he really, truly did have a zest for life. Just really, enjoyed every moment. When, probably shortly after 9/11, 2001, me and my brother were down visiting at his house here in Pinecrest, and we were, hanging out in his backyard. And at the time, it was very, very wild. As my Uncle Shaw just mentioned, rare trees, just very beautiful backyard. And to us, it was like another world. It was just so, bizarrely foreign to us. It was like a jungle. So we're back there and we're hanging out in the midst of the backyard. And my grandfather comes out and he says, "Hey, I've got an idea. I need y'all to set up a little fort back here because, you never know when the Taliban might show up, and we gotta be ready." So, me and my brother, of course, we're eating it up, and we're like, yeah, let's do it. So we created this little fort in the middle of the backyard. We called it Fort Fudge. It was maybe like, a pallet or two, maybe some cardboard, but we made a little tent of sorts. And then my grandfather kind of set us out on all these, various, little missions to do. Well, you got to stock up some coconuts because, you never know when you might run out of water. So we're getting coconuts, we're stacking them up. We're doing little, reconnaissance missions around the yard. Just a really, really fond memory of him, and kind of the playful side of him, and again, that's zest for life that he had. The other story I wanted to briefly mention was actually, let's leave it at that. Sorry. So this was a little later on, let's call it when I was of age to, partake in a New Year's toast. And just, we're all, gathered around, we're raising the champagne glass, and I think he saw like a little glint of something in my eyes. Because right before I took my, first little, gulp, which was what I had intended, he held up his hand. He said, "Hold it, brother. We're sipping it tonight. You gotta wet your lips and then think about it." So that's honestly one of the wisest things I've ever been told in my life. Thanks again for coming out. He's truly a larger-than-life figure to me. We greatly missed and loved. Thank you.
Next to speak is my sister, Judge Fleur Janine Lobree.
Good morning. As you all may recall, you've heard, and from what you've heard from everyone who's spoken thus far, everyone who will speak, our father was a father. He was never dad. And it wasn't because he didn't love us and he didn't have the family feelings that people's dads have, but he was just taught to be formal. And he raised us to be formal, not only at home, where he used to routinely say children should be seen and not heard, but in interactions with others. And so I can't ever recall referring to him as dad. I remember every year on Father's Day struggling to find a card that said father rather than dad. But he was very precise with language, not just with regard to how the family conducted oneself, but with regard to everything. And I can recall as a child, over and over again, he would say, "Do you know what X means?" And I would start, as many children do and many adults, and say, well, it's like, and I start to explain, my understanding of what the word meant. And he would always stop me and say, "I don't want to know what it's like. I want to know what it is." And what was behind that is he wanted me to have a good vocabulary and a good understanding of the English language. And that came from his love of language. So this is another one of his stories that was recorded by my brother Shaw. My father Eli always had us moving to some other place. We had no furniture. My mother's whole life, she never owned one stick of furniture. Never owned a pot or pan. Never owned a cup or coffee pot, a telephone, a car. She just worked to bring food home and have enough money to pay the pitiful rent for these one-room hovels that we lived in. The bedding, the pillows, the sheets were supplied in a furnished apartment. Never owned anything besides a couple of cardboard suitcases and our clothing. And through all of that, as a child, I never once felt deprived or unhappy. I was never unhappy about anything. I just accepted this is it. I'm alive, and this is what life is like. I couldn't wait to get up and figure out something new to do. I'm constantly using my brain to figure out how to entertain myself. Did I ever hear the word babysitter? What's a babysitter? I never had a babysitter in my life, never. I was just allowed to roam. Every day my mother's working, my father's out of town. We don't even know where he is. We don't know what town he's in. We didn't have a telephone. There is no communication. I don't remember getting a letter from him. He would eventually just turn up. But once in a while, he made money someplace and he'd wire her 50 bucks or 25 bucks or something. We'd get a notice that down at Western Union office there was money in a wire for May Lobree. That was rare, but it did show that he remembered us. I never had a friend until the 7th grade. How can you have a friend when you've got nothing to offer? You're new in the school. Strange little weak guy. Don't have any toys. Can't throw a ball. I just accepted it. That was the way it was. I was busy. Of course, there was no television and we didn't even own a radio. My only friends were books. I read thousands of books, all checked out of the library. We were in this and that town for a period of weeks or a couple of months. The first question always was, where is the library? Then I went and I got a library card, which I treasured those things. Incredible. My first question was, what are the rules here? How many days before you have to bring the books back? And how many books can you check out at a time? Some places you could check out 2 books or 3 or 4. I remember we got to one town. It was 6 books. 6 books. I had to walk 12 blocks to get home, and I could barely carry those 6 books. But I always checked out the most they would allow. When I would get home, what a treasure. I would be completely occupied, absorbed, reading these books. And when I had enough money down the road to buy some dinky little flashlight and batteries, at night I would have the books under the covers, holding the flashlight reading. I had very good reading comprehension. I learned to use a dictionary whenever I came across a word that I didn't know. So it was on my mind. How can I ever get enough money together to buy this book? Webster's Collegiate Dictionary with very fine India paper. It cost $4 or $5. I had just been salivating over it, agonizing about it. I'd go to the store and pick it up and page through it. Uncle Milton turned up one day from out of town and came to see us. We were living in a little furnished efficiency. I'm there with my mother. My father was not around. He's not in town. People just came and went and just turned up. So Milton just turned up one day, and it happened to be my birthday. He was very interested to see me. I'm now old enough to have a conversation. I'm a person instead of being a snot-nosed kid, and so he was interested in me. Milton never had any children. I was it. He and my father were very close. So my mother just happened to say to him, Milton, today is Harold's birthday. He's 10 years old today. It's his birthday, is it? Milton said. Milton had always been a generous guy. He said instantly, well, on a man's birthday, he ought to have a birthday present. He bends down and says, Harold, do you know what you'd like to have as a birthday present? I knew exactly what I wanted. I said, I sure do. I want a dictionary. He says, do you know where you can buy the book? And I said, I sure do. And we can go there right now if you want to. He left with me right then, and we walked to this bookstore, and I dashed in, and I knew exactly where it was. There it is. Milton took it down, and he wanted to walk to the front of the cashier and said, I want to buy this book for this young man here. It's an important book that he wants to own. Well, of course, sir. Milton paid for the book, turned around, and handed it to me in my trembling hands. I carried it home, and after some pleasantries, Milton left. I sat down and opened the cover, and I started reading that dictionary. Page 1, letter A. I read and I read and I read. I was just enthralled with all of these words and what they meant. And it had these diacritical marks to show you how to pronounce the word. And it showed you how to use the word. And I'd write a word down and practice using it in a sentence. Then the next day, I would spout out something to someone. People were taken aback. This little kid, worn out of clothes, using this big word. I liked that. It gave you power and a little dignity, a sense of self-worth. I spent weeks and months reading that dictionary. I don't know that I read it all the way through, but I spent months turning those pages and reading that dictionary. My object was to read every word in the dictionary. If I can learn these words, I can express myself perfectly to anyone. I'm up at night with a flashlight reading, 10 years old. Flashing forward a few years, when I was 10 years old, my mother told me that I was given an award from the librarian at Pinecrest Elementary School up the road because I checked out and read the most books in the school library. And they told me that I could go and get one book from a bookstore and purchase it. And I don't know whether it was my father's influence, because I certainly don't have any memory of wanting to read the dictionary cover to cover. But the one book that I got when I was 10 years old was the dictionary. And I pulled it off my shelf last week. I meant to bring it here today. Inscribed on the front cover, on the inside, it says, "To flirt with love from mother and father." So it wasn't from the librarian or the school. I did probably check out and read more books than anyone else in the school library because both of my parents instilled in me a love of libraries as well. But all these years in my mind's eye, that book was the prize that I won for reading the most books. But really it was a gift from my father. My father told me many stories throughout my childhood. As you heard, he was in the oil business after World War II, and he graduated from the University of Texas at Austin. He made his money during the boom, but at that time the government was charging almost a 90% tax rate on independent oil producers. And so my father planned ahead. He gave grants of land to my brothers and I so that we got the income instead of he to split the income and reduce the tax rate. And that funded our education. But my father, as a man in the oil business, he used to call himself a one-man oil company. He said, I did the research, the geological research to determine where I thought the oil would be. And then I went out and convinced the farmers to enter mineral rights leases for their land. And then I went and I got investors to help with the production. And then we drilled the wells, and I watched the wells at night. And 9 times out of 10, we got a dry hole. But the one time we would wind up with a productive well, the lawyers would come out of the woodwork and convince the farmers that I had stolen the minerals from their land and that they had been cheated and they should sue. And so he said, Fleur, the one thing I can tell you is I don't want you to have anything to do with a lawyer. You're fired. And I said, okay. And he told me a story about his business. And when these lawyers would come out of the woodwork to sue, to challenge the mineral rights leases, my father was very, very, very detail-oriented, not just about language, but especially about business and contracts. He would research the heck out of the provenance of a piece of property, and he would read contracts with a microscope, not just a magnifying glass. He was very meticulous. So he knew that the leases that he entered before he had undertaken this very expensive and time-consuming business venture were solid. So he had the best oil and gas lawyer in the Midwest who represented him. And when these suits would be filed, the lawyer would say, Hal, you don't need to worry about it. We're going to file a motion for summary judgment, and this suit will go away. And so my father was this man, trusted his lawyer, and they filed a motion, and he'd wait for the ruling. And months would go by, years would go by, and the lawsuit would still be pending. And go to the lawyer and say, I just can't understand this. You told me summary judgment would be granted. This would go away. It's been forever. Can't we do something about this? And the Midwestern oil and gas lawyers said to my dad, well, there is something we can do. We got something that I call the lazy judge law, which I think was his colloquial expression for what we contemporarily refer to as a writ of mandamus. And he said, you can go to the judge, we can file a petition and say that, you aren't doing your job and you need to rule on this motion, it's been pending for too long. And he said, but if he rules against you, you got to go back to that same judge you just called a lazy son of a bitch and ask him to rule in your favor. So I advise against it. So my father told me over and over and over again, I don't want you to have anything to do with the law. So when I went to college, I began school at age 16 with eyes on being a computer programmer. And I studied computer science for many years. But it was a math-based program, and I'm not a fan of math. And so I did not excel in school as my father had. I started at age 16, but I was doing well in classes that I liked and not going on to the others. So my father called me into his office a year before I was scheduled to graduate, and he said, I don't think this major is the one for you. You don't seem to be doing so good. I think you should change your major. So I switched my major to English, which I had always loved because he had encouraged me to have a love of language and reading from an early age. And a semester before I was supposed to graduate, he called me back into his office and said, have you given any thought to what you're going to do the rest of your life? And I don't know how I got up the courage to say it, but I whispered, I thought about going to law school. And I was terrified because he warned me against lawyers more times than I could count, but I was shocked because he thought it was a good idea. So he encouraged me to go to law school, and I went on to graduate. He tried to help me get jobs when I graduated law school. He arranged for me to have a job with one of the most senior judges, federal judges in Indiana, and I didn't want to go to Indiana, and I didn't want to take a job my dad arranged, so I didn't do it, stupidly. Then he arranged for me to have an interview at Baker McKenzie in Chicago, which at the time was one of the biggest law firms in the world. It was the original Baker and McKenzie, both of whom had retired by that point, had been investors in my father's oil business. And I didn't take that opportunity. So then he was disgusted. He said, I'm through with you. You need to go out and pound the pavement and find a job. That was his philosophy. You needed to be able to be independent, to stand on your own 2 feet, to support yourself. He told us you should never buy anything in life that you can't afford to pay for with cash. He wasn't against using credit and getting a free loan with other people's money, but you couldn't buy anything that you couldn't pay off at the end of the month. So I became a lawyer, and then 20 years later, I became a judge. And in my first assignment at the North Bay Justice Center in County Court, I was sitting up in North Miami Beach, and one day I was sitting in my hearing room, and an attorney comes in. He was 80, 65, close to 70. And he said, Judge Lobree. He said, by any chance are you related to Hal Lobree? And I said, well, yes, I am. That's my father. And he said, I've never met the man, but I went to Miami Beach High School, and I was a member of the Satan's fraternity in 1960-something. And we were required to learn the names of all the founders of the fraternity. And we had to be able to spell them backwards and forwards. So I will never forget Hal Lobree. Every member of our family will never forget our father. He was a man who was larger than life. He scaled back his oil business in the 60s before I was born, when he was still in his early 40s. And he invested the money he earned up to that point and provided for the life and the education that my brothers and I had, and spent all this time investing and moving money that I could remember in my lifetime. I had very little active business in the oil business, but he was a great teacher and not so much a friend. I mean, he loved us all, but he was a parent first. And we all have tremendous memories and respect for him, and I thank you all for being here today.
Continuing on the theme of my father as a great teacher, and another theme that my brother and sister before me and sons have touched on, of the theme of learning how to pick yourself up after getting knocked down. I've got a couple more tales to share. My father was about 4.5 years old when the stock market crashed in October of 1929, and the Great Depression began. At the time, as Shaw shared, his family was fairly prosperous, and they owned a mansion apartment building in New York. Like so many other Americans, they lost everything due to the nation's economic collapse and the bank foreclosures. It wasn't long before my father's dad, Elias, had to leave home in search of work, leaving my grandmother, May, and my father to fend for themselves much of the time. Although May was able to find food service work in a restaurant, my father realized that he needed to try to help out if he could. So at an early age, even as early as 4, he would find enterprising ways to earn a few points, such as by selling beverage bottles for a refund, or by recycling and reselling used newspapers and magazines, or sometimes by selling new newspapers in a designated location or route. Any change that he made was almost always handed over to his mother as a contribution to the meager family budget. As Shaw and Daniel shared, my father got taken advantage of or beat up on occasion as a kid by neighborhood bullies and street toughs. By the time he arrived at junior high school in Miami Beach in the late 1930s, he was a typical scrawny teenager who hungered for size and strength. My father recounted the following story in 2012 about his start at junior high. All my life up till this, I never played any athletics of any kind. I was small, weak, uncoordinated, never ran, and nobody ever taught me how to catch a ball or throw a ball, any ball of any kind. Even just the basic principles of catching a ball. I couldn't catch a ball. So at gym class, everything has a ball in it. People would throw me a ball and I couldn't catch it. I never had any instruction, didn't know what to do. I finally got to junior high and I see all these guys who are great athletes. Here I am, this undersized guy, weak, puny, who can't catch a ball, couldn't play any sports of any kind. It occurred to me, I gotta learn how to be an athlete somehow. This is not long after Jim Snedeker punched me in the stomach and laid me out on the first day of class in the 7th grade in homeroom. There were 2 guys in the class that were about a half an inch shorter than I was. I love these guys. Kofsky and Leibson. So we naturally agglomerate because we were the butt of all the jokes, of all these macho guys, and of all the athletes who would take turns which one of us they would want to pound on that day. Irving Kofsky grew up in New York City. He taught me all kinds of stuff I never knew. He said, Lobree, when you go to the store and your mother is going to get you some shoes, you've got to find the ones with the thickest soles and heel. That will give you another quarter of an inch. I was amazed at that. He told me you could buy some shoes called Adler elevators that will bring your height up 2 full inches. The other great thing was, he comes to school one day and he shows me at recess a magazine called Strength and Health. It cost a quarter, and it was the first magazine about weightlifting. There were all these different stories with pictures and whatnot and ads for barbells. I didn't have any money to buy any barbells, but I was convinced you could build yourself up. Kosky had started doing some weightlifting, and he had a little bit of muscle and tone. He'd done a little bit of weightlifting. The magazine showed you how you could build yourself up. This was also the start of Charles Atlas ads, the guy that was always getting sand kicked in his face. There was construction going on all over Miami Beach, and on Sunday, nobody's working. So I had a bicycle with a basket, and I went down to a construction site, and there were these 3 old cement blocks lying around. So I lifted up the cement block, put it in my basket, pedaled back to our apartment, and I put it in the alleyway behind the building. Then I went back and I got a second block. Then on my 3rd trip, I found a piece of plumber's pipe that I had liberated. Every day I would go down to the alley, set up my cement blocks, and put my pipe through. There were no collars or anything. So of course, the first few times you pick it up and hold the bar uneven, a little bit, one block slides off and the other one slides down and smashes your fingers. But there were some basic exercises that if I was terribly careful I could do. For example, a deadlift or a curl. I could barely do one curl, very carefully, very slowly, and I had to really arch my back. But I started it religiously every single day, 7 days a week. I had a tape measure, and I measured my biceps to start with, and I could feel things are getting firmer. Finally, after about a month or 2, I put that tape measure on there, and I had a quarter of an inch bigger. I was thrilled. I finally built myself up. It was tough enough so that I could push a few guys around who were winning. By this time, I'm friends with Jim Sediger and Bob Levitt, and I got them to teach me some things about catching a ball and throwing a ball in 9th grade. Finally, the big thing in high school athletics, if you played in a certain number of varsity games, you earned a varsity letter, a big B for beach hockey. If you got a letter the second time, they gave you a black stripe to put on your shirt or jacket. The real star athletes had 3 black stripes, so I thirsted to get a certificate and a letter. I came very late to playing basketball, but I finally got to be tough enough and strong enough, even though I wasn't tall, I could get a rebound by positioning myself between the competitor trying to get the ball in the basket, and by timing. As the ball is starting to come back, you push against the guy, give him an elbow in the gut, punish the guy, then you go up and get the ball. I couldn't shoot worth a damn, but I practiced, so I decided to go out for basketball my senior year. I'd never played organized basketball before, and I didn't have a shot. I practiced shooting, but it takes years to develop a consistent shot of any kind. I was also a student of the game, and I watched the good plays. During his years at Miami Beach, my father gradually worked to strengthen his mind and body, and his ability to work and earn money grew each year. He held a job throughout high school and had little time for studies and schoolwork. His grades always suffered, and in spite of his intelligence, he was not a good student by any normal measure. When his high school administered a national aptitude test in his senior year, he scored the highest in the county, which led school officials to accuse him of cheating, and also to question him very closely on how he had gotten away with it. Eventually, he was able to convince these naysayers that he had answered honestly and to the best of his ability, leaving them incredulous that such a seemingly poor student could have scored so highly. Fast forward to 1943, when my father was drafted in the Army. As soon as he turned 18, which also coincided to his high school graduation. The U.S. Army established the Army Specialized Training Program, or ASTP, in the early months of World War II in order to develop a formal technical training program for the brightest recruits. Top performing and scoring on the standard aptitude test score, top performing candidates fortunate enough to be accepted into the program were enrolled full-time in colleges and universities for formal technical training in the math and the sciences. Through the ASTP, top performing students had a path to a bachelor's degree and a commission as an officer in the U.S. Army. After basic training and advanced infantry training, my father had earned the coveted Expert Infantryman's Badge and selection to the ASTP. When the date came in late 1943 for him to ship out, he was transported with other ASTP candidates to the train station near Fort Benning, Georgia, where he had received his basic training. His ticket was for travel to the University of Arkansas, where he would study engineering. After a long wait, an Army Jeep pulled up, and a non-commissioned officer jumped out and told my father and the other waiting recruits that the AST program had been canceled and they were to report back to Fort Benning and await further orders. Several agonizing days later, he, along with all the other former ASTP candidates, were ordered to Camp Atterbury near Indianapolis, Indiana, to join the 106th Infantry Division, where he would receive further training as a radio operator and go on to fight in the European theater. He joined the 424th Infantry Regiment, the last infantry regiment formed by the Army in World War II, as a part of the 106th Infantry Division, the last infantry division the Army formed in World War II, although I don't believe he knew it at the time. You can imagine the bitter and crushing disappointment my father felt at losing his chance at a formal education and officer's commission. As he described the experience to me many years later, he shared that he went from being a super soldier to, in his words, Beetle Bailey, at least for a time. Eventually, he was able to move past this disappointment and relearn to apply himself as a soldier and an infantryman once again. After surviving the war, he was deeply blessed as he finally got the opportunity to attend college at the University of Texas on the GI Bill. A couple of notable ASTP program participants that you may have heard of: Mel Brooks, jazz drummer, actor, filmmaker, and composer; Bob Dole, United States Senator, Senate Majority Leader, and former vice presidential and presidential candidate; Henry Kissinger, U.S. Secretary of State and Nobel Prize winner; and Kurt Vonnegut, author of Slaughterhouse-Five. Vonnegut was a fellow member of the 106th Infantry Division, and sadly he was captured and imprisoned by the Germans, and the prison was a slaughterhouse building in the city of Dresden. And Vonnegut survived all the horrible bombing of Dresden because it was in such a stout building that had very deep floors well below ground. 3 of those 4 ASTP candidates, participants, are still with us. On to another great disappointment of my father's that he bounced back from brilliantly. He was selected for the Rhodes Scholarship by a formal committee when he was at the University of Texas due to academic excellence he had achieved, and for being an exceptionally well-rounded candidate, member of the Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society, U.S. Air Force ROTC Distinguished Military Graduate, and for finishing his petroleum geology curriculum summa cum laude. The Rhodes Scholarships were established after the 1902 death of Cecil Rhodes, who dreamed of improving the world by bringing remarkable students from the English-speaking world and beyond to study at Oxford. Rhodes' idea was that this effort would help the cause of international understanding and peace. Each year, 32 college seniors from the United States are among nearly 100 Rhodes Scholars worldwide who are selected to begin graduate study at Oxford. In the United States, applicants for Rhodes Scholarships must be age 18 or over, but not yet 24 in the year of application. Sadly, in my father's case, the selection committee had missed an important detail regarding his age when he was notified that he had been awarded a scholarship in 1949. Once again, as my father's bags were literally packed to travel to Oxford, England, he received a second letter from the committee informing him that a mistake had been made. Although he was exceptionally well qualified in all other regards, he was a few months too old and age ineligible for the scholarship, so the committee had to revoke the award. You can imagine the crushing disappointment than my father felt at receiving that news. But rather than spend time feeling sorry for himself, he decided to immerse himself in work. He immediately traveled from Texas to Indiana in order to go to work for his father, Elias, and his uncle Milton, who were having some success as independent oil producers in the Midwest. He thus began a 20-plus year period of very successful, hard work in the oil business, which was to become for me yet another powerful example of how to make lemonade from lemons. By his example, my father taught me how to pick yourself up after being knocked down, and how to double your effort to succeed when disappointment could otherwise cripple or consume you. I learned that it is not the knockdown that defines you if you can immediately pick yourself back up and carry on with the same thing. In addition to this lesson, his work ethic and his ability to enjoy himself after the work was done are lifelong lessons that will always endure for me. I will be followed by my brother, who is the Prince of Good Timing, Albert Lobree.
Sean. I'm going to start off today with a quote that my son, Paul Lobree, just recently shared with me. It's a quote from a book that's called Those Who Remain by T. Michael Hoff. It goes like this. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. So what I'm going to do is read some of my father's own words, as you've heard many of us do. And these were his own words. They were very hard to get out of him for years and years and years. Us growing up, we want to know about World War II. We wouldn't talk about it. Lots of times we tried to get it. But my brother Shaw finally got him to talk about it and recorded this. So it's extremely meaningful to me. Because I'm going to start off and I'm going to tell you, as my brother told you, he was drafted at age 18. He was 19 when this story happened. I'm going to point to my son, Paul Lobree, not because he's good looking. His mother and I are very proud of him. He's in Virginia Tech Corps of Cadets. He's 19 right now. So I want you guys all to have that in context when I read this story. Private Harold Lobree was a 19-year-old infantryman and switchboard operator in the headquarters company of the 424th Regiment of the 106th Infantry Division, the Golden Line. And by the way, this is his actual shirt. And there's two insignias that you'll see. Here's the Golden Lion. Later on, you'll hear me talk about the Bloody Bucket. The 106, first off, the 106 had 15,000 troops. 3 regiments, the 422, 423rd, and 424th. The 106th arrived at the St. Vith area of Belgium on December 4th, 1944, 6 months after D-Day. The 422nd and 423rd were stationed along the Eifel Mountains on December 11th, and the 424th was stationed a bit further to the south. The Army's rule was that one division, 15,000 men, would be responsible for no more than 5 miles of the front line. On the eve of the German attack, the 106th was covering 26 miles because the Allied command believed it was the quiet sector and unlikely to see action. This was in the midst of one of the coldest winters on record, with several feet of snow on the ground. It was heavily overcast and foggy. There's a couple pictures on the table that I'd really like you guys to see if you have a minute that show the conditions, these exact days this happened. The Germans attacked without warning on December 16th, 7 days after the 106th had arrived in Belgium. The 422nd and 423rd were almost immediately encircled and cut off by the Germans. The 2 regiments surrendered on December 19th. The Germans captured 6,000 prisoners, one of the largest mass surrenders in U.S. military history. In all, 75% of the 106 troops were wounded, killed, or captured. The 424th and the remnants of the 422nd and 423rd were reinforced by the 28th Infantry Division and withdrew to join U.S. units at St. Vith. Along the city of Bastogne, St. Vith was a road and rail junction vital to the German offensive goal, which was to break through the Allied lines to split American and British forces and reach the port city of Antwerp. The stand made by the 106th stalled the German attack and significantly contributed to the Allied defeat of Germany's final offensive. Now, in my dad's words, one of the most important items of equipment in the whole regiment were the switchboards. It was the nerve center, the heart of all communication. There were precious few radios in use and unreliable vacuum tubes at the time. So they laid telephone lines on the ground to connect the units, the front of the headquarters to the rear. So you had to protect the switchboard. So every time we would move, they would send guys around to each farmhouse. The farmhouse that had the deepest, most protected cellar, the best roof, the best building, that's where they would put the switchboard, underground. So I'm in the cellar with a switchboard. That's why I'm alive today. Because when the Germans started bombarding us, and their tanks came in with 88mm cannons, blowing up everything, killing our guys, I was in the cellar managing the communication link between our front line and the 106th headquarters. It's kind of warm in the cellar. There was a stove and people would congregate in there, mostly non-coms, sergeants. They're talking back and forth, and I'm listening. When I can finding out more and more. And when I can, finding out more and more. I'm collecting information on the fly. Because the whole time I was in the Army, nobody told us enlisted men anything. I'm soaking up information from the officers coming in and also from the calls I was connecting between the front and headquarters. Sergeants started coming in with terrible stories about this happened there. So many guys were getting killed and blown apart. The guy's covered with blood that's splattered. And this guy's covered with blood that's splattered. One sergeant said, "I'm getting out of here." The other sergeant said, "What are they going to do? What's the orders?" One shouted, "There aren't any orders." Then my sergeant turned up in the cell and started questioning the other non-coms. "What's going on? What's going to happen?" Nobody knew anything. My sergeant was terrified. And he starts sniveling. And he starts crying. He had 25 years in the regular army, but in the chaos and an impending doom totally unnerved him. Finally, he went running out of the cellar, and I never saw him again. I realized things were in chaos. I was tracking what had been happening and knew that the Germans had already swooped around one end of our unit and had captured a bunch of U.S. officers. We started to hear the German tanks. We can hear the treads rumbling, the treads of the tanks rumbling. They're coming through the trees, crunching down brush. The Nebelwerfer rockets were going off. The screaming meanies. So guys started bugging out, one after another. My orders are to stay put no matter what. The last thing they want to ever go is the switchboard. It provides all the information they have. So finally, all the guys in front have been overrun, and there are no more phone calls coming in. No more communication. They're either all captured, killed, or they've run off and abandoned their field phones. So I realized, nobody told me, that I don't have a function anymore. There's a half a dozen enlisted men sitting around, shivering and sniveling, noses running. It's freezing outside, snow on the ground. It suddenly gets quiet as hell because the non-coms bugged out already. When things started getting bad, I realized I had to get out of there when the time comes. Some others had already left things behind when they ran off. I had a map. I found a compass and a flashlight, some ammo and hand grenades. I started gathering up rations that were lying around. D-bars, which were a chocolate bar loaded with energy for energy and other nutrients. So I'm jamming all this stuff in my pockets in case I have to bug out. There's nobody around, there's no orders, nothing. Chaos. The German tanks are getting louder. There are no more calls coming in from the front. We're about to be overrun in 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute, who knows? There's several other infantrymen with me in the cellar and ask, "What are you going to do, Lobree? What's happening?" I said, "I don't know what's happening, but we're about to be overrun, and I'm going to get the hell out of here." They say, "Where are you going?" I say, "I don't know exactly where I'm going, but I'm going back. I think I know which direction is back, away from the Germans. Anybody want to come with me?" 4 guys say, "We'll come with you." I said, "Well, look around, see if you can find any D-bars, hand grenades, ammo, stick it in your pocket. I'm leaving in 3 minutes. You got 3 minutes." So they raced around grabbing stuff. So I leave. I'm using the map with a flashlight and the compass to figure out which way is back from the German attack. We take off through the woods. It occurred to me to go, if we go through the dense enough woods, the German tanks weren't going to go there. They're going to go to a road or in an open field. It's about 2:30 or 3 a.m. in the morning at this moment. And here come these 4 guys behind me. We go quite a way through the bush, and finally we come out in the field someplace. Then the land goes up again, and there's a ridge, and I see some lights. So there must be a road up there. I say, "Let's go up on that ridge." We make it to the ridge, and I say, "Now listen, guys, we've got to hide in the bushes here and be very goddamn quiet. There's a vehicle coming. We have to wait and decide if they're Americans or not. Because if they're Germans, we sure don't want to surface and get slaughtered or captured." So we wait. Dawn is just starting to break. The vehicle lights are getting bigger and bigger. Finally, I can see on the side of the truck what looks like a star emblem of the U.S. Army. I say, "They look like Americans to me, guys. Let's go on those trucks." We break up onto the road, and I say, "Wave your arms. Get your handkerchief out. We got to make this truck stop." Finally, the truck sees us, and the guy jams on the brakes. And he can see we're Americans, or hopes we are. We had heard previously that the Germans had recruited guys that spoke English, took American uniforms off dead bodies, dressed in those uniforms, infiltrated U.S. lines, and did a lot of damage. So all of our soldiers were very wary. I say, "Yell at them in English. Make them know we're Americans." So I yell, "Hey, buddy, New York Yankees. We're from New York, Brooklyn, Bronx." The truck driver says, "What's up, guys?" I yell, "We need to get the hell out of here. The Germans are a couple hundred yards away. We want to ride with you." He says, "Hop on." We climb in the back of the truck, an open truck, with the staves on the side, and the driver guns it. There are 3 trucks on the mini convoy, so we barrel down the road. We're sitting on these wooden boxes in the back of the truck. We slowly notice that they're labeled dynamite, explosive gas. I got my flashlight out. We're looking at the boxes, and we see all the warning labels. As it occurs to us that we're sitting on boxes of dynamite, and we're going over bumpy roads. The boxes are jumping up and down in the truck, and the Germans are close behind us. The other guys start to become terrified, and they're talking amongst themselves and making one another more frightened, and they start crying and sobbing. I realize the absurdity of the situation, and I start laughing. I said, "This is the funniest damn thing I've ever seen. What are you guys crying about? What good is it going to do? We're either going to get killed or we're going to get out of here. It's one or the other. You can't do anything about it." I got them to stop crying. After a while, the trucks pulled over and we had crossed a small bridge. They quickly rigged some dynamite and blew it up. We start going again, and we get back about 25 miles. Finally, we see a unit of U.S. troops, and I say, "Let's get the hell off these trucks now. I've had enough." We ran down and attached ourselves to this unit. It turns out the company was the 28th Infantry Division, the Bloody Bucket. I asked, "Where's the first sergeant?" Someone says, "You mean Sergeant Hunt? He cut him off. I cut him off." I said, "Yeah, him." So they rush me back to the sergeant. I tell the guy what I know about the Germans. I say, "We're all that's left from the headquarters company, the 424th Infantry Regiment. There's 4 of us. We want to join up with your unit. We were casuals. That's what they call soldiers who just turn up and aren't with their assigned companies. So they put us in a company with all the casuals. My brother added a note. Out of the 15,000 soldiers in the 106th Infantry Division, only 325 were awarded the Bronze Star. Private Harold Lobree was selected to receive the Bronze Star because he had stayed at the switchboard until the last possible moment, long after many soldiers senior to him had abandoned their position, and for his bravery leading several other men to safety with the attacking German army right on top of them. So you've learned our father was hard by hard times. You've heard about his tough childhood upbringing and the Battle Bulge story from his own words. What I wish to quickly reflect on today, to communicate to everyone here in attendance, to not soon forget, are the hard lessons learned that he and our mother sought to teach us, primarily their own children and grandchildren, as a result of their life experiences. First one, when you meet someone, look a man or woman right in the eye, give them a firm handshake, and say, "How do you do?" Many in this room experienced that one. My dad was very serious about working hard to use your brain to become an officer versus being an enlisted man like we did. Even after, I'll point this out, even after Sean told you, after World War II on the GI Bill at the University of Texas, he went back to the Reserve Officer Training Corps to become an officer as well as get his degree. My father was very big on keeping your wits about what is going around you at all times. Now you know why. Be ready to act at a moment's notice when the time comes. He was all about having an extremely high level of situational awareness, readiness, and ability to act fast. When raising us as parents, when raising us as children, our parents silently prioritized being the parent first and being friend second. My dad was very big on getting very strong as a young person and staying fit. Man, did he talk a lot about this the last few months, 94 and a half, as he was losing his ability to walk. He said, "All this exercise I did when I was young got me to here." I also remind he was brutally honest when he gained a few unsightly pounds in terms of fitness. He taught us all how to punch, kick, and fight so as not to be bullied at a young age. The sports we all played were all about making us mentally and physically tougher. He continually pushed us to give it all you got, brother. But he not only wanted us to be smart, strong, but both mentally and physically tough. So much of what our father and mother did was to develop the grit in us. As you heard, my dad was a big reader, dictionary lover. For me, he got me reading the Wall Street Journal. He made me read the herd on the street and the abreast of the market columns daily, and starting in the summer when I was in 7th and 8th grade. And I do that to this day. He wanted us all to go to college and get good grades to further yourself so you can earn a shingle. Do all your schoolwork first, then go have a good time once your work is done. He always preached to us to work hard, do the job asked of you. Don't be a gold brick and fake work. Gold brick was the term for people that were lazy, that didn't do what they were asked. He said, no one likes a gold brick. It's very clear. You got to learn to follow orders first and do what you're told. He preached and lived the lesson well, to live within one's means all life long. Our father was clearly a survivalist. He wanted to live and never get wiped out, both financially in terms of his life. He was a heavy saver, a financial and business risk avoider, always remembering the Depression. He taught us to save for catastrophes. His quote was, "Bad things can and do happen." He called them catastrophe strokes. He taught us to keep our noses clean and stay out of the courts, as my sister alluded to, away from lawyers and lawsuits at all costs. You also pointed out to me to never expect a lawyer to give good business directions to you. One thing, though, I got to reflect on that was very meaningful to me, served me well, was he taught us to realize our strengths and weaknesses and to work on the weaknesses, but to really heavily leverage your strength and mitigate the weaknesses and to the extent possible in life, sports, and business, but to really count on your strengths. He always taught us to use humor to live and excel through life's difficult moments. He taught us to respect good manners, appreciate fine words, fine food, wine, and good jazz music. My father's favorite novel was Look Homeward Angel by Thomas Wolfe, the book he wanted all of his kids and grandkids to read after college is a cautionary tale. It's called Buddenbrooks by Thomas Mann. Our mother and father dedicated many tens of thousands of hours to their children. Most all fathers have hobbies, go play golf, fish, boating, travel, something to enjoy themselves. Our father and mother made furthering us their hobby. Many of you know I'm a terrible, very worst singer in the world. But I want to wrap up today with a World War II infantry marching song that our father often hummed and sung to us when taking a long walk or doing outside work. I'm never going to forget it. So here goes. Be kind to your web-footed friends, or a duck may be somebody's mother. They live in the wet and the cold, where the weather is always dumb. You may think that this is the end, and it is.
Now I would like to invite my niece, Lily Elizabeth Lobree, to come up and share a letter that she wrote to her grandfather after learning last month that he had passed away.
Hi, my name is Lily Lobree, and I'm very privileged to be Mr. Lobree's granddaughter. I wrote this. Here it is. In his head there was wisdom, in his soul there was jazz, but in his body there was pain. He wanted to pull through and live, and not suffer. It was God's will to take him, to keep him from pain. I know that Hal Lobree has blessed others by serving our country, raising his 4 children, and learning and spreading his wisdom. He has lived through many hard times. I know that God has followed his plan and stopped my grandfather's suffering. He has helped me expand my vocabulary and was very glad that I was a ballerina and a sailor. He had a wealth of oil and wisdom. I love you, grandfather. May you forever rest in peace. Love, Lily Lobree. I hope that I will see you someday and that I will make you proud.
Now I would like to invite Lily's sister, Lena Mae Lobree, to come up for a piano tribute to her grandfather. And the piece is entitled Rainbow Colors. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask everyone to please final tribute of tax provided by the University of Miami School of Music. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, grant to the living grace, to the departed rest, to the nation peace and concord, to us all, your servants, the promise of everlasting life, light to guide us on our way, courage to support us, and your blessing to unite us in service to you, our God, and this, our country. Almighty Father, help us to remember that freedom does not automatically perpetuate itself, that we have to work at it, nurture it, protect it, and pray for it. Freedom, like faith, needs our attention and our cooperation. Lord, be with us now to strengthen us, about us to keep us, above us to protect us, beneath us to uphold us, before us to direct us, behind us to keep us from straying, and round about us to defend us. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the unique gifts and lessons of Harold Samuel Lobree. We thank you for the wisdom and love we receive from him and the memories of him that we will always cherish. May we be filled with strength and courage to entrust him into your hands. Comfort us in our grief, Lord, and give us assurance of your promise of eternal life. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our memorial celebration. Please join us for reception here at Pinecrest Gardens.